Have you ever wondered why some of the greatest minds in history, including the Buddha himself, chose silence over certainty? Today, we're diving straight into one of the most mysterious aspects of Buddhism, the 14 questions the Buddha refused to answer. And trust me, by the end of this video, you'll see that silence was not avoidance. It was the highest form of wisdom. So before we begin, hit that like button if you've ever struggled with questions that seem to have no answer, and subscribe if you're on this path of learning, healing, and awakening together. Let's get straight to the point. For more than 2,500 years, both Buddhists and non-Buddhists have misunderstood the Buddha. It's not just outsiders who misinterpret his teachings. Even monks and scholars within the tradition have often missed the essence of what he realized. During the Buddha's lifetime, some of his disciples misunderstood his teachings so severely that it led to tragic outcomes. For instance, a group of monks once practiced a meditation on the impurity of the body, not to understand impermanence, but to the point of despair. Some even took their own lives, believing that was a way to detach from suffering. When the Buddha heard of this, he lamented, "I did not say that. I did not teach that." That's how easily truth can be twisted when it's only half understood. This misunderstanding didn't end in ancient India. It continues even today among Western scholars, spiritual seekers, and even casual readers who see Buddhism through the lens of philosophy or science. Many people still believe Nirvana means eternal death, or a void where nothing exists. But the Buddha described Nirvana as the supreme happiness of liberation, not the annihilation of life, but the freedom from clinging, craving, and confusion. Nirvana is not something far away. It's a peace that can be experienced right here, right now, when the mind is free. So what exactly did the Buddha discover? Here's the key difference between him and science. Science looks outward. It studies the world, matter, and the universe to reduce suffering by changing external conditions. The Buddha looked inward. He realized that suffering arises and ends within the mind. While science believed the mind knows the world, the Buddha discovered that the mind knows itself. In other words, enlightenment wasn't about the structure of the universe. It was about understanding how perception, craving, and consciousness shape what we call reality. Let's pause there. Think about how much time we spend trying to fix everything outside of us: jobs, money, relationships, governments, even the planet, believing that changing the world will finally bring peace. But have you noticed that even when the world gets better, people still suffer? That's because the real battlefield is not outside. It's in here, in the mind. The Buddha saw this 2,500 years ago. That's why he didn't build temples to worship the stars or create doctrines about how the world began. He taught the Four Noble Truths as truths about the mind, not the universe. Now, this is where people, even devoted followers, started to misunderstand. Later Buddhist schools, trying to reconcile the Dharma with metaphysics and cosmology, started claiming that the Buddha was enlightened about the world itself, about atoms, the cosmos, infinity, and time. But that's missing the point entirely. The Buddha didn't need to know whether the universe is round or square, finite or infinite. Once suffering ends, those questions no longer matter. When your mind is free, whether the world expands or collapses has no power over you. That's exactly why the Buddha refused to answer certain questions, the ones that don't lead to liberation. His silence wasn't ignorance. It was compassion. Let me give you an example. One of his disciples, Buddha, became frustrated because the Buddha wouldn't answer questions like, is the world eternal? Does it have an end? Does the soul survive after death? Buddha even threatened to stop practicing unless he got answers. So the Buddha asked him, when you decided to become a monk, Did I ever promise to explain such questions? The disciple said, No. Then the Buddha replied, Then why do you insist now? He told him a parable, one of the most famous in Buddhist history. Imagine a man shot by a poisoned arrow. Instead of allowing a doctor to treat him, he demands to know who shot the arrow, what kind of wood it was made from, what tribe the archer belonged to, and why he fired it. The Buddha said, if he waits for all those answers, he will die before he ever pulls the arrow out. The meaning is powerful. All struck by the arrow of suffering, pain, loss, aging, fear, uncertainty. But instead of removing the arrow through awareness and practice, we waste our lives asking, why me? Who caused it? What happens after? We want cosmic answers before we begin healing. That's exactly what keeps us trapped. And if you think about it, this is not ancient philosophy. It's everyday life. We do this constantly. We're heartbroken, and instead of healing, we obsess over why it happened. We lose our job, and instead of learning, we spend years blaming others. We face death, and instead of living, we spend our remaining time fearing the unknown. The Buddha saw this pattern in human nature, and his silence was a cure. In modern terms, the Buddha was saying, don't chase the noise of the mind. Heal what's hurting now. His teaching was never about solving metaphysical puzzles. It was about liberation through direct experience. So when you hear that the Buddha refused to answer 14 questions, understand this. He wasn't avoiding the truth. He was pointing you back to where truth actually resides. And here's my personal take. The reason these 14 questions still fascinate us is because they reflect our deepest anxiety, the need to know before we can let go. But the Buddha's wisdom reminds us, you don't need to know everything to be free. You only need to see clearly what is happening inside you. The story of the 14 unanswered questions is one of the most fascinating lessons in all of Buddhism, not because of what the Buddha said, but because of what he didn't. Long ago, there was a monk named Milankiyaputta who, like many of us today, wanted certainty. He wanted the big answers about the universe, the soul, and what happens after death. Frustrated by the Buddha's silence, he finally said, if you don't answer my questions, I will stop practicing. Calmly, the Buddha replied, did I ever promise to answer such questions when you became a monk? Milankiyaputta admitted that he hadn't. Then the Buddha told a story that has echoed through time, the story of the man shot by a poisoned arrow. Instead of allowing the doctor to remove the arrow, the man insists on knowing who shot him, what kind of bow was used, what tribe the archer belonged to, and why he fired. The Buddha said, if he waits for all those answers, he will die before the arrow is pulled out. And then he added, you are like that man. Each of us has been shot by the arrow of suffering. If we waste our lives on questions that don't lead to healing, the poison will spread. That moment defined his teaching forever. The Buddha's silence wasn't ignorance, it was compassion. The 14 questions themselves sound abstract, but are incredibly revealing. They ask whether the world is eternal or not eternal, finite or infinite, whether the Buddha, the Tathagata, exists after death or does not exist, whether the soul and body are the same or different. For each question, the Buddha remained silent. Why? Because every possible answer, yes, no, both, or neither, traps the mind in a false framework. To say the world is eternal implies something unchanging. To say it is not eternal implies annihilation. Both are wrong views. Reality, the Buddha realized, is not a fixed thing to define, but a flow to be understood. Everything arises and ceases moment by moment, just like the breath moving in and out of your body. When you try to pin reality down with words, it slips through your fingers. It's like holding a handful of water and claiming to hold the ocean. One day, the Buddha walked through a forest, gathered a few samsapa leaves in his hand, and asked the monks, "Are the leaves in my hand more or less than those in the forest?" The monks answered, "Far less, Lord." The Buddha said, "So, too, what I have taught is like the leaves in my hand. What I know is like the leaves in the forest. I teach only what leads to the end of suffering." He was not hiding knowledge. He was protecting his followers from drowning in it. He knew that intellectual curiosity could easily become another form of attachment. So he taught only what matters, understanding suffering, its cause, its end, and the path to its end. Everything else he left to silence. Think about how that applies to us today. We might not ask if the world is infinite, but we ask modern versions of the same questions. Why do bad things happen to good people? What happens after we die? Will I ever find lasting happiness? They sound different, but the trap is the same. We seek ultimate explanations instead of learning how to live. While we're busy debating the meaning of life, we forget to live it. The Buddha's silence invites us to stop chasing the noise of thought and start paying attention to the mind itself. Liberation doesn't come from intellectual answers. It comes from insight, from seeing things as they truly are. The Buddha understood that some questions cannot be answered at all within the boundaries of human logic. Concepts like existence and non-existence, self and no self, coming and going, they are mental constructs. When you cling to them, you fall into what he called the two extremes, eternalism and nihilism. His middle way transcends both. In fact, modern physics gives us a glimpse of what he meant. When scientists ask, is light a wave or a particle? The answer is both and neither. The truth doesn't fit into categories. The Buddha's silence worked the same way. It wasn't denial, it was transcendence. When I first read about the 14 questions, I thought the Buddha was avoiding responsibility. But the more I studied, the more I realized his silence is itself a teaching. It exposes our need for certainty, our addiction to knowing. We want everything labeled, defined, predictable. But the truth that sets us free isn't something we can grasp intellectually. It's something we can only see directly. The silence of the Buddha forces us to look within, to face the mind that keeps asking and asking, hoping that one final answer will end our fear. The paradox is that the asking itself is the fear. The Buddha's silence points to freedom beyond concepts, to a peace that can't be spoken, only experienced. It teaches us to let go of the obsession with cosmic theories and turn instead toward the reality of our own suffering. That's where transformation begins. So next time your mind spins with questions about destiny, the universe, or the meaning of life, remember the poisoned arrow. You don't need to know who shot it. You just need to pull it out. And before we move on to the next part, we will explore how these unanswered questions connect to impermanence, non-self, and karma. Take a deep breath and ask yourself, what arrows am I still carrying? What endless questions are keeping me from healing? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read them. And if you're finding value here, hit like, share this with someone who overthinks everything, and subscribe so you don't miss the next part. Because the Buddha's silence wasn't the end of the conversation. It was the beginning of awakening. When the Buddha chose silence, he wasn't withholding wisdom. He was redirecting it. He was teaching us to look not outward to the stars, but inward to the heart of experience itself. After Malankyaputta's confrontation, after all those questions about the world's eternity, the soul, and the afterlife, the Buddha didn't stop there. He revealed something far deeper, that enlightenment is not about finding answers to cosmic mysteries, but about transforming the mind that creates those mysteries in the first place. He saw that what we call reality is not a world out there, but constant interaction between mind and sensation. Every sight, sound, thought, and emotion arises and passes away moment by moment. The Buddha didn't awaken to the universe. He awakened to the mind. Science explores matter to change the world. The Buddha explored consciousness to change the heart. While scientists seek to end suffering by altering external conditions, the Buddha discovered that true liberation begins by altering perception itself. The Four Noble Truths, suffering, its cause, its cessation, and the path, are not external truths about society or physics. They're inner truths about how the mind clings, resists, and finally releases. This is why the later obsession with metaphysics, with whether the world is finite or infinite, or whether the Buddha exists after death, completely missed the point. Enlightenment has nothing to do with cosmology. It has everything to do with freedom from delusion. The Buddha said that when the mind is freed from craving, ignorance, and clinging, it no longer matters whether the world expands, contracts, lives, or dies. The awakened mind transcends all of it. But of course, human beings are not satisfied with silence. We want to define, label, and analyze. Even today, scholars debate. What exactly is nirvana? Is it a place? Is it extinction? Is it consciousness? Some, like the Belgian scholar Louis de Lavillée-Poussin, question how karma and rebirth could exist if there is no self. If there is no soul, he asked, then who experiences a result of actions? It's a good question, but again, the Buddha didn't answer in the way philosophers wanted. He saw that the question itself assumes something permanent, a self that acts and then suffers a consequence. Yet, when you look closely, that self cannot be found anywhere. The Buddha explained this through the concept of anatta, or non-self. What we call I is just a bundle of 5 constantly changing processes: form, sensation, perception, mental formations, and consciousness. None of these is stable. None of them is me. They're like 5 flowing rivers that meet for a moment and then move on. So who acts? Who suffers? The one who acted yesterday has already changed by today. It's not that there's no continuity. It's just that the continuity is dynamic, not static. It's like the flame of a candle passing to the next candle. The light continues, but no single flame is the same as before. Once, King Milinda asked the monk Nagasena, "Are the soul and the body one or two?" Nagasena didn't answer directly. Instead, he asked, "Your Majesty, are the mangoes in your royal garden sweet or sour?" The king replied, "I cannot say, for there are no mangoes now." Nagasena smiled and said, "In the same way, how can we speak of a soul being one or two with the body when there is no eternal soul to begin with?" The king was silent, and that silence was understanding. The Buddha's insight into impermanence and non-self is the foundation of his teaching. Everything changes, every thought, every feeling, every breath. Nothing stays the same, not even for a moment. But this is not a reason for despair. It's the reason we can grow, heal, and awaken. Imagine if nothing changed. Babies would never grow. Wounds would never heal. Ignorance would never turn into wisdom. Impermanence isn't suffering. It's the possibility of transformation. The real suffering begins when we resist impermanence, when we demand that what we love must stay and what we fear must disappear. That's why the Buddha said, "Where there is impermanence, there is no self." The self, by definition, is something permanent and unchanging. But nothing we can point to, not body, not feeling, not thought, fits that description. The belief in a fixed self is the root of all conflict, fear, and craving. We cling to an illusion and then spend our lives defending it. When that illusion dissolves, what remains is peace, the peace of nirvana, not as a distant realm, but as a calm presence that arises when the mind no longer fights with reality. If you think about it, this isn't just ancient philosophy. It's incredibly practical. How often do we suffer because we can't let go of who we think we are? We say, I'm the kind of person who never fails, or I'm always a strong one, or I can't live without them. But life keeps changing, and our idea of I keeps breaking. The Buddha's wisdom teaches us to flow with change rather than fear it. When we stop clinging to the idea of a solid self, we find freedom in motion, just like a dancer who becomes one with the music rather than try and control every step. And yet, this teaching goes even deeper. It challenges our entire view of reality. The Buddha said that all things, not just people, but mountains, rivers, stars, are also anatta, without self. Everything is in flux. Nothing has an independent existence. Everything arises through conditions and fades when those conditions change. When you understand that, compassion naturally arises, because if there is no separate self, then your pain and my pain are not different. The walls between us begin to dissolve. We realize we are all moving within the same river of impermanence. So what then did the Buddha really discover? Not an answer, but a perspective. That freedom comes not from defining truth, but from living it. His silence was a mirror, showing us that some of the most important questions in life cannot be answered in words, only in awareness. When you stop demanding explanations from the universe, you begin to hear what has been whispering all along, that peace is not found in certainty but in presence. In the end, the Buddha's silence teaches us one of the hardest truths, that wisdom is not about collecting knowledge, but about letting go of everything that keeps us from seeing clearly. When you no longer chase the noise of what if, when you stop arguing with reality, when you sit quietly and feel life as it is, that's when you touch nirvana, not as an escape, but as a simple, radiant understanding. This moment is enough. So, as we close this part, take a breath. Don't rush to explain or analyze. Just sit with what you've heard. And if this message resonates with you, if it made you pause and reflect, show some love. Hit like, share it with someone who overthinks everything, and subscribe to stay on this journey of wisdom and self-discovery. Comment below and tell me, what's one question in your life that you're ready to stop chasing? Remember, the silence of the Buddha isn't emptiness. It's the beginning of true understanding. The story of the 14 unanswered questions doesn't end in silence. It blossoms into one of the most powerful lessons the Buddha ever gave, the middle way. This is not just a philosophical idea. It's a way of living, a way of thinking, and ultimately, a way of being free. It's where wisdom meets compassion, and understanding replaces confusion. So if you've ever felt torn between extremes, between holding on and letting go, between belief and doubt, this part of the journey is for you. Before we begin, make sure to like, share, and subscribe, because what we're about to explore could change the way you see every decision, every thought, and every moment in your life. The Buddha once said, I avoid both extremes and teach the Dharma through the middle way. But what are these extremes? On one side lies eternalism, the belief that something within us or in the universe will last forever, untouched by change. On the other side lies nihilism, the belief that nothing matters, that everything simply vanishes into meaninglessness. Both, the Buddha saw, are traps. Eternalism makes us cling to illusions of permanence. Nihilism leaves us hopeless and detached. The middle way is not a compromise between them. It's a transcendence of both. It's the realization that life is neither permanent nor meaningless, but fluid, interdependent, and alive. Think about how much of modern life swings between these extremes. We live as if our possessions, status, or relationships will last forever, and when they crumble, we collapse into despair, saying nothing matters anymore. We jump from craving to rejection, from obsession to emptiness, never realizing that peace lies not in either pole, but in balance. The Buddha's middle way is the art of walking through life without being pulled by attachment or fear. Let's make this real. Imagine two people. One clings desperately to control, planning every detail, fearing mistakes. The other gives up entirely, saying, "Why bother?" Both suffer. The first is enslaved by perfection, the second by apathy. The Buddha would say, neither control nor chaos will bring peace. Awareness will. The middle way is not passive, it's active presence, choosing each moment with clarity, not compulsion. This is why the Buddha refused to answer the 14 questions. Every one of them led toward an extreme, eternal or annihilated, existent or non-existent, self or no self. His silence wasn't the absence of truth. It was a space where truth could breathe. As he taught Annihilation, one of his disciples, when asked whether the Tathagata, the Buddha, exists after death, he said, "Annihilation, even while I am sitting here, can you truly find me? Can you find a permanent, unchanging Tathagata in this form, or in these sensations, perceptions, or thoughts?" Annihilation answered no. The Buddha smiled, saying, "If you cannot find me here now, how could you find me after death?" That single teaching dismantled centuries of metaphysical debate. To the Buddha, existence and non-existence were just mental cages. To answer within them is to lose sight of the living truth that transcends both. Categories like being and non-being, birth and death, unity and division, these are linguistic tools, not reality itself. And because language can never fully capture truth, the Buddha chose silence over distortion. Modern science, interestingly, has come to echo this insight. The first law of thermodynamics says that matter and energy cannot be created or destroyed, only transformed. Nothing truly comes into existence or ceases to exist. It merely changes form. The Buddha understood this long before science, not through experiments, but through deep observation of the mind. To him, all things, thoughts, emotions, identities, even suffering, arise, transform, and dissolve. To cling to them is to suffer. To observe them with equanimity is to be free. I remember a story that brings this home. A man once approached a meditation teacher, frustrated after years of searching for enlightenment. "I've read hundreds of books," he said. "I've meditated for thousands of hours. I've debated philosophy with everyone. Still, I don't understand what truth is." The teacher smiled, poured him a cup of tea, and kept pouring until it overflowed. The man shouted, "Stop! The cup is full." The teacher looked at him gently and said, "Exactly. How can I pour wisdom into a cup that's already full of questions?" That's the essence of the Buddha's silence. Sometimes we must empty our minds before we can receive understanding. The middle way is not about indifference. It's about insight. It's learning to see that every emotion, every event, every idea is impermanent. And because it's impermanent, it can be understood, embraced, and released. When you stop fighting reality, you stop suffering. That's what the Buddha discovered. Not the structure of the cosmos, but the liberation of the heart. And it's not abstract. You can live the middle way today. When someone criticizes you, instead of clinging to anger or collapsing into shame, just watch what arises in your mind. That tightening the chest, that voice that says, "I must defend myself." Don't feed it. Don't fight it. Just see it. That seeing is the middle way. When you lose something precious, instead of denying the pain or drowning in it, breathe with it. Know that it changes. Know that you change. Freedom lies in that awareness. In the end, the Buddha's silence invites us to stop being spectators of life and become participants in awareness. The 14 unanswered questions are like a mirror reflecting the futility of intellectual pride. They remind us that truth is not a debate to win, but a state to embody. To understand the Buddha is not to collect facts about him, but to live his discovery. That peace arises when the mind stops clinging to concepts and starts seeing directly. So maybe the question isn't why didn't the Buddha answer, but rather, why do we keep asking? Perhaps the real invitation is to sit in stillness, to breathe, and to listen, not for words, but for understanding. That's where the middle way begins. Before we continue to the next part, take a moment to reflect. Are there questions in your life that you keep asking, hoping they'll fix your pain? What if you stopped chasing the answers and started watching the mind that asks? That's the practice. That's freedom. If this resonates with you, please share, and comment with the word balance. It helps others find this message, and it lets me know you're walking this path with me. As we reach the end of this journey through the Buddha's silence, I want you to pause, just for a moment, and feel the quiet between your breaths. That stillness you feel right now, that's where the teaching truly lives. The 14 questions, the parables, the debates, they all dissolve into the single truth. That peace is not something we find in words, but something we awaken to when the mind stops demanding explanations. So if you've made it this far, take a deep breath, hit like, and stay with me until the very end, because what we're about to reflect on could change how you see every question you've ever asked. The Buddha's silence wasn't about avoiding the truth. It was about leading us to the one place where truth actually resides, the mind that is aware, present, and free from clinging. For thousands of years, human beings have searched for ultimate answers. Where did we come from? What happens after we die? What is the purpose of existence? And yet, the more we search outward, the more we seem to lose our way inward. The Buddha reversed that direction. He turned attention back to the source, the observer, the consciousness, the simple awareness that witnesses everything. He was telling us, you don't need to know the shape of the universe to find peace. You only need to understand the nature of your mind. That's a radical message. Even today, in a world that rewards knowledge, argument, and endless scrolling for more information, silence feels rebellious. We're taught to have an opinion on everything, to define, to judge, to categorize. But the Buddha showed us that sometimes the most intelligent response is stillness. Because stillness isn't emptiness, it's clarity. It's the moment when the muddy water finally settles and you can see straight to the bottom. Let me tell you a story that captures this perfectly. There was once a young monk who meditated in the forest for years, hoping to find enlightenment. One day, he ran to his teacher and said, "Master, I think I understand the truth. Everything is illusion. Nothing exists." The teacher smiled, poured him a cup of water, and said, "So you don't exist either?" The monk hesitated. "Then who is drinking the water?" The teacher laughed softly and said, "Exactly. The truth cannot be trapped in words like exists or does not exist. You must go beyond both." That's what the Buddha did. He went beyond all extremes, beyond existence and non-existence, beyond birth and death, and found the middle path of direct experience. That same path is open to you right now. You don't have to be a monk or a scholar. You don't even have to understand every teaching. All you need is sincerity, the courage to look at your own suffering, and the patience to stay with it until it reveals its lesson. The Buddha's entire message could be summed up in this. Don't look for truth in the clouds of thought. Look for it in the clear sky of awareness. When you begin to see that, Something inside you shifts. The endless chase for certainty begins to soften. The questions that once tortured you, why did this happen to me? What if I never heal? Lose their power. You realize you don't need all the answers to live fully. You just need presence, kindness, and a mind that sees clearly. This is the secret behind the Buddha's so-called silence. It wasn't an absence of knowledge. It was a statement of liberation. He refused to play the game of dualities, of yes or no, is or isn't, because he had already stepped outside that system, and he invited us to do the same. When you stop chasing the impossible certainty of thought, you begin to live in the certainty of experience. You taste your tea more deeply. You listen more carefully. You love more gently. And you suffer less, not because life becomes perfect, but because you stop fighting it. That is what it means to live the middle way, not floating between opposites like a balanced beam, but walking freely beyond them. It's knowing that impermanence is not an enemy, but a gift. It's realizing that every ending is a beginning, that every loss carries wisdom, and that every unanswered question is an open door. The silence of the Buddha wasn't a blank page. It was a doorway. And when we walk through it, we find not nothingness, but peace. Now, if you watch this far, it means something inside you already understands this truth, that wisdom doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers. Maybe you've been carrying your own 14 questions, worries about aging, about death, about purpose, about meaning. Maybe you've been waiting for someone to give you the perfect answer. Let this be that answer. You don't have to keep waiting. You can start living right here, right now. The peace you're seeking has been within you all along, beneath the noise, beneath the fear, beneath the endless need to know. So as this video ends, try something simple. Turn off your screen, close your eyes, and just breathe. Don't analyze. Don't label. Just feel the breath as it moves through you, in, out, here, now. That's meditation in its purest form. That's how the Buddha answered the unanswerable, not through argument, but through presence. If this message resonates with you, please like this video, share it with someone who overthinks or struggles with uncertainty, and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss our next deep dive into the Buddha's wisdom. And in the comments below, write the single word, silence. Let's fill the comment section with stillness, a reminder that understanding doesn't always come from talking, but from listening. Thank you for staying until the end, for choosing reflection over reaction, and for walking this middle way with me. Remember, the Buddha's silence is not a mystery to solve. It's an invitation to awaken. The questions of the universe may never end, but when your mind becomes still, you realize you no longer need them to. That's where real freedom begins.